Crafty Gediminas. Here we have a high-born bridegroom. Well, not quite a bridegroom, rather a young man. He promised to marry your daughter, but then a month later announced, No, you didn't quite understand me. Not marry her, just keep dating. How would you react? Like the saying goes, promises are made to be broken. Sadly, this is especially the case in politics. Think of any election campaign. Do you think things were much different in older times? Let's take a look. 700 years ago, Lithuania was still a pagan country, so it was not yet part of Europe. Grand Duke Gediminas understood that his country needed, as we'd say today, to integrate into the Christian world. So he sent 6 letters out to Europe. He invited traders and craftsmen to Lithuania, who he promised all sorts of privileges. He invited monks, whom he guaranteed freedom of religion. Lithuanian historians agree it was a pretty good advertising campaign for the country. But what most interests us here is that in the letters, Gediminas even several times promised that he'd have himself christened. Well, okay, he didn't actually promise, but he let it be understood. Do you get the difference? What Gediminas was saying in his letters was this: We've sent an envoy to the Holiest Father to discuss our joining God's church. We're waiting for the Pope's envoy and are prepared to implement his will. And he assured, iron will become wax and water steel, before we could go back on our word. One of the letters was addressed directly to the Pope, who believed that Gediminas was actually serious about being christened. The Pope sent 2 envoys to Riga, the monk Bartholomew and the abbot Bernard. But when they got to Riga, the monks sent their own envoys to Vilnius to find out when and how Gediminas was planning to become a Christian. In Vilnius, the envoys met with the Dominican monk living there named Nicholas. They sat down, drank some wine, and then had a real shock. It turned out that Gediminas has changed his mind. How could it be? Why? In his letters, he had more than once said that he wanted to become a Christian as soon as possible. But there you go. The envoys couldn't believe it. So they asked for an audience with the Grand Duke. Gediminas asked them, Are you so sure that you know what's written in my letters? Of course. You write that you wanted to be christened. Well, Gediminas almost lost it. What's wrong with you? Can't you read? It's clearly written that only God knows what's in my heart. And anyway, it's my scribe's fault. I never told him to write anything about my christening. And if I ever did have such a thought, the devil himself can christen me. The scribe tried to explain himself. He said that he'd only written what came out of the king's lips. But no one listened to him anymore. Then the envoys quoted Gediminas' letter. But you wrote that you want to be an obedient son, and that the Pope would be your father. That indeed is true. I respect him like a father, because he's older than me. And I consider that any man older than me is like a father. I consider the Archbishop my father, because he's also older than me. While those who are the same age as me I hold as brothers, and those younger as sons. Now the envoys understood everything. In Lithuania, under certain conditions, iron can indeed turn into wax, and water into steel. Maybe in our times, Gediminas would be considered an adherent of realpolitik.